Hello everybody and welcome back. You've got me, Deborah Hatswell, once again, and as many of you asked that me and Paul Sinclair could get together again, and we've managed to do that for you. And we've just been talking a little bit offline before we came on, because obviously me and Paul have a very similar interest, and it seems that, like many of you out there are areas that are cropping up in the country that seem to be a hotspot for all kinds of activity, and I'll explain a little bit more. When I made the Bigfoot map many years ago, I was criticised because I added accounts on that were not of an upright, tall, hairy gentleman, we shall say. And I did that for a simple reason, because people were reporting to me about those areas. So, for instance, there is Thetford, and I put a report out in Thetford of an upright, tall, hairy male, and a lady got in touch with me and said, I don't know anything about that, but in Thetford Forest I had a really strange experience with these lights that seemed to lead me off into the wood. Somebody else got in touch with me and said that while they were down there in Norfolk Wood, they heard their name being repeated as if to be called into the wood. And it's always interested me because it's also an area of high UFO sightings. So as I say, Paul's with me now, and what we're thinking of doing is, and we need your help with this basically, if you've had not a Bigfoot account, you can have a Bigfoot, I mean anything across the board that has seemed incredibly strange or weird, if you've lost time, if you've been in an area that you're well used to and you've heard something really unusual, you're in an area you're used to and you suddenly get lost for no reason whatsoever. That's happened to me on occasion, and it was almost a strange out-of-body experience. We are wondering if there are certain areas within the country or within the world where the energy, shall we say, and this is all up for theory, isn't it, that area seems to have a lot of action. Like Bempton, for instance. Me and Paul, you've heard us speak before about the area of Bempton. And there are other areas like that on the map. And Paul, like me, takes accounts from people. So we hear from people all the time up and down the country of these strange happenings. So we're thinking of getting together and seeing what we can come up with. We might be able to correlate a few things. You're much better with words than I am, Paul. Can you explain it a little bit better than me?
No, I think you've covered it there, Deborah. You know, I mean, but I think it was a big mistake previously. I mean, obviously you've done your Bigfoot map, which is a fabulous thing, but it was a mistake to worry about other people's opinions when you were putting other type sightings and other types of experiences on this map.
Yeah.
Because the Bigfoot stroke dogman phenomena, they do seem to, I know they show up all over the place, but there are concentrated locations where these things are seen, which crop up time and time again. Like Flixton, for instance, near me, and Danes Dyke, and you've got hundreds of locations because you've researched well out of the areas that I'm researching. But what also is, we're missing a trick if we're not going to sort of start to correlate the other unexplained phenomena that's occurring in the same areas, because it would be interesting to see whether the lights are being seen when we're getting reports of the Bigfoot, or the Dogman. I mean, I don't know whether they will be, but my gut feeling is that they are. Let's find out whether these things are all being seen near burial mounds and ancient earthworks, which I think we already know they are.
Yeah.
So just to report that these creatures, or the reports of these creatures are in these locations, is brilliant, but we can add to it by finding out what else is being seen around this area. And you touched on the electronic voice phenomenon, or the people being called into the woods. I mean, I thought as you were saying it, people having their names called into the woods, that almost takes on, how would something know to call a specific name?
Exactly.
There's an extended intelligence. It's over science, this. It's an extended intelligence, Deborah, that we're not understanding here. If something can pluck a name out and it's the right name and draw someone into an area, then we've got something potentially. Is it reading minds? Or is it just some universal knowledge that just knows? it's a fabulous idea to put all these things on a map. I mean, I'd imagine the map would get full pretty quick.
It would get full pretty quick, but it's, as you said to me earlier when we were off air, if we can see that in that one area, say within a 20-mile range, that we've got sightings of figures, we've got audio, we've got maybe EVPs, anything that's out of the ordinary. To me, I want all that in the pot when I'm trying to work out what's going on. There's no point me just having one little bit of the puzzle. I want to know exactly what's happening in that area and what's being reported over decades, really.
As we said before, Deborah, does the area draw the phenomena in, or does the area throw the phenomena out?
Yeah.
And are we dealing with something that's, as crazy as it sounds, that's some kind of chameleon and can be a multitude of things? I don't particularly think we are, and you hit on a good point earlier. All we're doing is speculating and theorising, but that's all we can do. And if we can kick these ideas about, other people listening just might think, Christ, I've just thought of another angle to what Deborah and Paul's just said, which will enhance the theory or the speculation. And if we could get listeners potentially to start contributing with however unexpected the experience is, or unconventional, as in it's not just something as straightforward as lights or a Bigfoot sighting. So it could be something quirky, but if it's unusual, it might be unique to that area. And there might be a spate of lights, and let's call it 1976 that the lights were seen. But a year later, Bigfoot sightings were seen. I know not everybody can remember specific dates and years, because it's not something everybody's going to just sort of think, oh, I'll make a note of that in my diary. But weather conditions, anything, because if we're going to get a hold of this subject, I think the people that are listening, there will be some sat listening thinking, what a load of rubbish, and I just want to now contribute and tell them out what fools they are for talking about this subject. But the bulk of the people that listen, they'll be listening because they've had an experience, or they're open-minded enough to know that there's something very real to this subject, be it UFO related, Bigfoot related, whatever paranormal angle that you want to take. It's probably all interconnected, Deborah.
And historians, if there are any historians out there, whether you think what we're discussing is complete bunkum, that's absolutely fine with me, but still, to be on the safe side, will you have a look back in what you know, where the archives that you can access? Are there any reports of paranormal activity, lights, crafts being reported as far back as you can go? And if there isn't, that's fine, but you just might find a piece of that puzzle for me. And I say to a lot of skeptics when they come to me, that's great, and be as sceptical as you like, but you can still be of use to me. You still have sources at your fingertips that I cannot get to. So whether you're on board with the idea or not, you've still got the technical research, you can go and do it. Do you know, if you're a historian or you work in a local library, if you run the WRBS, have you spoke to anybody that's come in and said to you, we had a really strange experience that weekend when we were out? Those little stories that are told within families are really important to people like Paul and me, because they tend to dovetail. We will then, we'll put it out maybe in a video, or we'll be chatting about it, and someone will say, well, hang on a minute, I remember something like that. Or, not exactly that, but when I was in that area, that seems to happen to me all the time, and it happens to you all the time, doesn't it, Paul?
It really does. I've got a fabulous story which I've been writing about this week of a lady from Bridlington, and they call this lady Anne, and it originates from a place called West Hill in Bridlington, and it goes back, I don't know, it goes back to when this lady was 16, and I think she's about 70 now. So she claims that she was with her first boyfriend, maybe a bit older than 16, because she said he was in the RAF, and he was working on the RAF marine launches in Bridlington.
Yeah.
And they were walking in this area of West Hill, cutting across to a place called Carnaby. I realise that the listeners won't know these places, but it's all built up now. There's a Morrison's supermarket, there's houses, a few industrial estates. But back then it was just fields, and this was a cut-through path. And this is just one quirky story that sat there for the best part of 50 years. And I got it last week. Fabulous, absolutely brilliant. And spoke to that lady, actually it's not something that a friend of a friend's told me. She says, it's a lovely hot summer's evening, she says, and we're walking through along this path towards Bessingby. She said, and suddenly we both acknowledged, we both realised we'd stepped into something else. She said it became like a fridge. The air was just absolutely clap cold. She said, and we both knew it. She said, and I became very, very frightened. She says, all birds stopped singing. We couldn't hear a thing. Where we're in this this Goldilocks zone. We're in this strange area. And something had overtaken us. And another interesting thing was when the guy, she's still in contact with this man all these years later, and she messaged him, phoned him up to tell him that I'd inquired if I could have this story to write about in the new book.
Yeah. And
he remembered it, and he says, he says, do you remember the owl? And she said, owl? And then he went on to explain. He says there was a huge white owl flying silently in circles around us. And she says, I'd forgotten about the owl until he said it then. And obviously there's something much deeper to this lady's story and this chap. And the memories are probably too far gone and they're too deep now to ever revive anything else. But something happened. But this is in an area between Bessingby and Carnaby where the archives, like what you've just been talking about, Deborah, reveal lots and lots of strange phenomena. But it's not as dramatic, it's not as exciting as some of the things that happened, say, in Bempton, more visual when we're getting these animal mutilations and things. But nevertheless, these areas that you're appealing for people to come forward and tell you about the happenings, I think are just as important because we'll pick up valuable clues.
Yeah, exactly. It's those little tiny details I want to know about, because back before the paranormal was interesting and everybody had an EMF meter, lots and lots of stories didn't get told. So they just got lost to time, and we don't know them, and we'll never ever know them now. But they would have been a little small piece within that report. They say they were out and they might have only reported howls and screams, or they might have only reported lights. But as you said, with the lady remembering something, it's when sometimes I find when I'll speak to a witness and I've got the complete story and I put it out. A prime example is, I think I've spoken about before, ladies in a car driving back from Nottingham, heading back to Manchester, 4 in one car, 4 in the other. They all see a running figure. Each one described it differently because one saw a complete front, some saw the side and some saw the back. And if I hadn't have spoken to every single one of them, I wouldn't have realised I got to the last one, and she's the lady who's seen it face on said, and it had breasts. So if I hadn't taken the time to track and speak to every single one, that vital piece of information that this running figure was actually female would have been completely lost. And that is probably one of the only sightings of a female type creature in the UK up to now. So to me, that little detail is incredibly important. And again, in an area of UFO sightings, paranormal activity, dogman sightings, strange creatures crossing the road, so much going on the M6, it's unbelievable.
So what is the link then? Is it just that the area is just plain strange and attracts this phenomena, or disperses the phenomena? There's got to be something. I mean, I know we sound like we were prattling on and saying there's got to be something, but at least banging your heads together and trying to come up with answers. The suggestion of this map, a multi-sighting, multi-experience map, is a great idea. And if we can get contributors and ourselves as well to try and put years to it. If we say years, I mean, in some cases you might be able to put a year and a month. And weather conditions. We might actually see some patterns forming. We know, Deborah, that primarily your subject is the Bigfoot. I'd like to cover lots of different things, and I don't mind sort of being open to having a look at them all. However,
I am. I'm open. I don't mind.
Oh well, that's brilliant, because I think it's the only way we're going to find any answers. I don't know whether we will find answers, but we've just got to keep trying, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. But things sometimes I think can be in lead. Sometimes I feel like a chess piece on a board. because something will happen. Like, we got an account that was quite near to Todmorden, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting, that. I'll have a look, see what I've got in the Todmorden, Ebden Bridge area kind of thing. That led me to Sigmund Adamski, which, if anybody knows out there, was the guy that they found on top of a coal pile. You'll know it, won't you, Paul?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
As if he'd been dropped from above, and he had a strange substance on him. And then,
didn't he? And they were burnt as well.
Yeah, and they've never been able to. All the scientific tests in the world can't come up with what this substance is. But then that led me to it was a policeman called Alan. I can't remember his name.
Alan Godfrey.
And the abduction. Yeah. And then I thought, this thing just keeps spiralling out. So I originally went there over to a witness who'd seen a dark figure running down the road, and I realised that in this, what I looked to me like a flight path of sightings, as if something was moving backwards and forwards within that area, because the amount of, I don't know if it's because of Winter Hill, I'm not really sure, but the amount of accounts that come in from there of UFO experiences, paranormal experiences, there's just a wealth of them, and I don't think there's anybody that's putting them all together.
Well, perhaps then that's why we need to start.
Yeah.
Just briefly, when we were on about Bessingby and Carnaby just then,
Mm-hmm.
you were just talking about, I was told a story by a guy called Mark Sturdy. Mark's in hospital at the moment, bless him. I hope he's sort of recovering. Mark told me a story. They used to work at Sarah Lee's, which is the cake factory. Probably people remember seeing these cakes for sale in freezer shops.
Yeah.
And what have you. Well, that were in Bridlington, or they had one in Bridlington. And he wanted to know why his work colleague chose to cycle 3 miles a longer route into work every day, rather than just going from West Hill to Carnaby. And he told him that he went to work early one morning, and a dark figure suddenly appeared in the road and chased him. Gee. And he was terrified. And he's not talking about some guy acting about in a cloak and they're all having a snigger. This is like he's on early morning shift, and it frightened him enough then to spend the rest of his working career doing a 3-mile detour to avoid this road. But where are we? We're on the road, very close to where they had this sort of experience of high strangeness, Anne and her former boyfriend, and Phil Morris, the guy I told you about, who first told me, put me in contact with Anne, 1970s. He saw a green glowing oblong. Mm-hmm. He says, I thought I was seeing things. He were coming home from a Golden Gloves nightclub. That's where they were coming from, because I remember him telling me. He said, and walking across, he said, and just walking across this path, and this thing, he said, at about the height that the upstairs windows would be on a house. And it was glowing green, and it was oblong, and it just went straight over his head and across the fields. I found it in an archive in papers, and I was working with Philip Morris at the time, and Philip said to me, well, I never said anything. He says, but I saw that, and then he told me his story. So these areas, they're throwing up all manner of unexplained phenomena. I wouldn't say constantly,
no.
But another thing as well is, you don't know, a lot of them, these places are that remote. I mean, it's not now so much West Hill and that, but such as Bempton.
Yeah.
How much unexplained phenomena actually occurs where people, they're never there. Nobody actually knows it's happening.
Yeah.
Because I have wondered, Deborah, if maybe, let's assume I go to Bempton 5 days a week, on evenings a week, and I see nothing. But then somebody else goes up just for a walk, takes his dog onto the beach and onto cliff tops and sees something. The phenomena might be presenting, but it might not really take us into consideration. And Paul Sinclair's nothing special.
Yeah, I get you, yeah.
If he's up there when it happens, then the phenomena will present. If it's the type of thing that interacts with people, then it would interact. If it isn't, he's just going to get a glimpse of something otherworldly. But I could go 360 days a year and see nothing, and Joe Bloggs could take his spaniel for a walk on cliff tops and see it. I don't think it takes us into consideration sometimes when it's appearing or when it's acting out. Maybe everything, every living thing, every blade of grass, every worm under soil, maybe they're all just slightly touched by it when it arrives. But us, we're a little bit more conscious as in that we think things through on a different level to what an animal will think when it's looking for food. Yeah. We're more aware of it.
Human beings reason everything away. they've been taught to reason everything away. So anything that they see, there's got to be a reasonable explanation for it, because that's where you comfy, in it, when you can. Oh well, that's what happened, and that. But it don't work like that for a witness.
It doesn't, and I tell you what is frustrating, when the so-called experts, because I don't really know any, but when the so-called experts decide that they know what a witness has seen,
yeah.
they explain what I've had people telling me about. Well, we were out on the cliff tops and we saw these 5 lights appeared, or one light appeared, and it instantly formed a row of 5, evenly spaced with gaps in between. Then it switched off and it appeared somewhere else in sea, over at sea. And then we saw it somewhere else. And then it went over land. I had a guy poaching up on cliff tops at Buckton. I'll not say his name. And he rang me up and he said to me, Paul, where are you? And I was just going to take my daughter to karate. This is probably 2007. He said, do you need to be up here at Buckton now? I said, why? He said, I'm on cliff tops. He said, there's a row of lights just appeared out at sea, and he's telling me about it, and he's there on his own. He says, oh, wait a minute, they're switched off. And then he's going, whoa, they're on edge of cliff, they're near me. And he's telling me this story as it's unfolding. Now, that never made the local newspaper or anything, or any paper, but you would get experts saying, well, what he actually saw was afterburners from jets, or some unusual atmospherics. I mean, that seems to cover a lot of things. I think we all do it as researchers. We all try to defend our subject, so to speak, but we need to defend it because there's an handful of people looking into it and taking it seriously, and there's an army of people dismantling it.
Yeah, there is exactly the same area as what you're discussing now, same subject. A lass up in Cloddymoss, which is in the top of north of Scotland, and she walks every morning at 5 a.m. It's what she does. She knows that wood by back of her hand, and I say lass, she's my age.
Yeah.
So she's not a lady given to imagination or anything like that. She's a dog rescuer, in all honesty, and she likes to walk early morning. She knows that forest like the back of her hand. And she started experiencing, I'm going to say orbs, but it's the wrong word, lights that emit their own light, that can even be seen in the daytime, shooting across the path in front of her and things like that. So she started photographing them and filming them. And the amount of people that said to her, oh, it's Saturn, middle of the day, walking in the middle of a forest, but yeah, it's Saturn. It's a lighthouse. She's like, look, I'm not dumb. I've worked all of that out, that, it is not a car light, it is not a poacher, it's not a torch, it's not will-o'-the-wisp. What I'm saying is, I know this area like the back of my hand, and this is not normal, what I'm seeing, and I'm able to photograph it, even in the daytime. So there was more. I think it was only me and a couple of others that said, keep photographing them, just keep doing it. Take your phone when you're out and do, just keep collecting that evidence. Everyone else is saying, well, what's the point? What's the point? It's just, well, we won't get anywhere. We sit in a chair and say, well, I've decided what it is. That's it. Subject's over. We wouldn't have even advanced as a human species if we'd settled for that, would we?
We wouldn't, Deborah. And it's over science. This subject is over science, and science doesn't want to tackle it.
Well, yeah.
I'm not a scientist, and I never will be. I'm a humble joiner by trade, but at least I'm having a look at it because I know it's real. Even at the risk of ridicule, when you've seen things that you can't explain with your own eyes, then you do get defensive, and you either draw into yourself and say nothing about it.
Yeah.
And we've all done it. We've all seen people sat in a bar or sat down somewhere, and you've all said, "Oh, tell them about what you saw." And they go, "Oh no, it don't matter." Well, I did see something strange. And then when they come out with story, it's incredible. But they don't talk about it because 4 or 5 people sat with them will just look at each other and start making little daft noises.
And weirdly, when you talk to them on their own, they tend to have a story as well, and that's why they're taking the piss, I shall say. That's why they're taking the Michael.
That's correct. But we're never going to stop that kind of thought process.
No.
But I mean, where I've been going to Bempton these very early mornings all this year, I I've been going into a little strip of woodland at the side of the fields, and I hope we didn't talk about this last time, because I don't think we did.
No.
But I ventured into this wood, and it's a narrow wood. It's at the side of Danes Dyke. It's a very old wood, and it's private. And so there's not many people go in it. Brackens are 3 or 4 foot high, or it was then. It's gone over a little bit last few weeks. People will probably know if you walk around fields. It'll be the same where you are. I'd walked into it about 400 or 500 feet, and this is like 5:30 in the morning, and somebody's talking behind me. I've only got one way out. Oh, there's a barbed wire fence and a field of borage. That's the purple plant. I could have climbed took my coat off, put it over the fence and climbed fence, but I've had to go through a crop, and I won't do that as a rule. But did it frighten me? Yeah, it did. And I don't mind saying it, because at 5:30 in the morning in a private wood, which is not far from the cliffs, there's nobody there. There's nobody around, but clearly there was. And I thought, I've got to go back this way. There's only one way back to the car, back where I've just walked. And I did, and I'd sort of, I were on edge going through this wood, and I went through it this morning, funnily enough, but that's the first time I've ventured through the wood since, my phone for you, since that last week that I've done a full, circuit of the wood. But I couldn't discern what they were saying, but there were voices. Now, what was that? Because the farmer in the farm, there's only one farmhouse nearby, tells me that, I think I might have touched on that other week, he's hearing walkie-talkie type electronic voices. And I've said to him, well, whereabouts, in the wood? He says, no, in that field about 10, 20 foot away from where I'm stood now on this decking. He says, but there's nobody there. So what kind of phenomena is producing this? Yeah. We've got this on recording. I took an old Sony tape deck, and I took an Olympus digital voice recorder, and we've recorded it. We've actually got it. It's undiscernible. It's screaming and chatter. Right. And we're in the middle of nowhere. Now, the farmer's heard it. He says, thank God for that. He says, I thought I was going mad.
Validation,
so I'm going to have to put this out, Deborah. I'll have to put it onto one of these, just load it onto internet and put it out onto the Truth Proof page. It doesn't prove anything. At the end of the day, we know that there'll be 1,000 people out there going, well, he could have just recorded somebody walking in a park.
But there'll be one who says, I've heard that. I've heard that, and because there's a guy called Liam who lives in the northeast, so he's further north than you, and he got in touch with me because it started with noises for him, noises that he could not explain, so he just started taping them. So if he hadn't stumbled on me on YouTube, he would have just sat there on his iPhone, and I was like, send him the things that you describe. I call them the invisibles. I get those accounts all the time of either heavy breathing or a mumbling chatter that they will either lead them into the wood, as I said before, or will always be just out of your range, so you can't see who's doing it, but it's there. Then I get told of metallic noises. People often mention a metallic type of noise. One guy said he thought it was like a toy airplane, and it was going to bump into his head. He kept looking for it. And it was above his head. And he said, I didn't know if it was one of those drones or something. I thought it was someone taking the Michael. But where I was, there wouldn't be anybody flying a drone kind of thing. So people are hearing, you've got what the witness interprets it as. Do you get what I mean? They're like him thinking, it's the plane or whatever. But then it's worth making a note of that, because there was no plane. And he couldn't understand it. So to me, that's going on the map, because I want to know that that's happening in that area, know.
Yeah, that's correct. And you see, the witness can only interpret as something that we know as human beings and understand. Yeah. That's why, we're not going to think of new words tonight.
No, that's it, innit?
But that's why we need a new vocabulary or new words to describe these things. Because, when the thing that pulled me backwards in Danes Dyke, I haven't got the words to describe that feeling. I said it felt like two magnets that want to push each other apart, and it took me ages to think to give an example to the listener to explain the feeling, because just saying something pulled me backwards is not good enough.
I
could pull you backwards, or you could pull me backwards, but it was the actual feeling. It was strange. It was so unnatural. And, you know, everything that we're seeing, everything that these people are experiencing is unnatural to what we know and understand. And we don't accept it as being real, I suppose, so that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought about Anne's recollection of the owl, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, when she said I'd forgotten all about it until this
mentioned
chap
it, yeah.
mentioned, do you remember the owl? And then I thought about the alien abduction scenario.
Yeah.
And people just remember little fragments, or they've got little cameos of events. And so I just expanded that, once again, theory and speculation.
Yeah.
But what if part of the reason, I don't think anybody will have ever said this, what if part of the reason that we don't remember, or we just remember little fragments, is because these memories are supposed to be stamped and imprinted on us, like as almost in our DNA, so that through the process of future generations, our future offspring will be more accustomed and more enabled. You know, it might be one speculation too far, but if people are experiencing these things and not remembering it, obviously are the memories too traumatic to remember that we're not supposed to remember, or is there another reason? Could it be that they're just placing memories in our head that they want us to sort of carry through in like a stamp of DNA?
Yeah,
I don't know, bad people.
Like the crow experiment. They have a genetic memory, don't they? And that genetic memory is just followed through from generation to generation. They've never seen a caveman, but they know to react when they see it. So that's only by genetic memory. There will be a lot of Bigfoot researchers out there now that will say owls. I can't believe he's mentioned owls. It happens to them all the time. Owls that swoop above your head. Owls where you get... I've never heard of it, like a swarm of owls, where there's more than one owl in the group.
No.
Circling the woods, making racket. That's not an owl behaviour. I don't think that is owl behaviour. Where they, especially in a group of them...
You don't get flocks of owls.
Flocks of owls circling above cottages and things like that. Strange owl calls that just don't seem right in the middle of the day in the rain. Little...
Well,
you know...
Whitley Strieber's abduction experience, he claimed before the abductions began, he used to see an owl sat in his backyard, a white owl sat watching him. You know, and like you're on about... Sorry, because I buttered in there.
No, it's right.
Cottages.
Yeah. And like people hearing when they're out, I mean, we know for a fact owls don't really fly when it's wet because they can't. They're one of the birds that are not waterproof, so to fly in the rain for an owl is quite dangerous. And they can get hypothermia and die. So if you're hearing an owl in the wood that's moving around in the middle of the rain, that's quite strange. I've heard them in the middle of the day, and it's like, what? Like, really, like, took me aback. But how you explain to somebody that it doesn't sound right, I don't know how you put that into words. I am used to owls. I have owls that nest on the back. So we're used to the noise of the owls and not owl habits. And you never hear them in the day. You just don't. And then I've heard them in parts of the wood where I know that they're not... there's no owl boxes in there or out like that. There's not really a whole lot going on in there. And it's always really quickly... It just doesn't sound right. I don't have the words to put it into words, but it's not a typical owl call. It's off like something's mimicking an owl almost. And it kind of leads you on a merry dance. And you end up nowhere. You don't get you anywhere, but you still... The amount of people I have spoken to that have had that experience, and we actually have a name for it now. We call them wonky owls.
Yeah, well, you know, the owls, I mean, it does... there's a guy, Mike Kelland, in America, wrote a book called The Synchronicity of Owls, I think. Or is it The Messenger? I'm not certain. But he's done quite a lot of work on that. I'm sure the book's quite popular. But where we used to live at Old Dennerby, I've had one strange experience involving an owl. Same place where all weird stuff happened, and the land between Old Dennerby, the village, and Mexborough, it was swampland, and it ran along the side of the River Don, and when there were heavy rain, the River Don used to burst its banks and flood this area of land. And I can remember because I was always sort of observing and watching stuff, and I'm an only child, so a lot of time to do things on my own sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing what looked like a silver pencil moving along the water, the flooded water, which were very shallow. I think you could have gone out in waders and which walked about in it.
Yeah.
But while I'm watching this, what I thought looked like a dragonfly.
Yeah.
But like I'm at it again. I apologise, listeners. Telegraph pole length.
Yeah.
Silver. Moving about, and then all of a sudden, I saw a huge white owl just seemed to lift. It didn't lift off the water. It couldn't have done.
No.
You know that they're not sort of
No.
ducks or swans. It was an owl, and I forgot about the pencil. Just this owl, I couldn't believe where it had come from, and I can always remember that. And I've been writing about it in one of the books, the Night People. Don't know where the owls figure. I don't know what the significance is. I'm sure there's better people than me that do, but I don't. But interesting though, nevertheless. And jumping back to your map.
Yeah.
If we can just begin to gather all these bits of information, I'm sure that we will reveal a pattern. We might not reveal an answer, but a pattern's a start.
Yeah, it is.
After Deborah will pick up on that pattern and take it a little bit further. There'll be somebody looking at something and thinking, they've got something here. Now, I just want to look down that because they never thought of this.
Yeah.
And ka-ching, a light will come on. It could almost be like that these places are erupting in a sequence.
The timing of them, yeah. The other thing that we have to look at, and it's a subject that a lot of people don't like, but there's also the missing. There are areas in the UK of missing people. Normally males between the ages of 18 to 25. I mean, Manchester's a perfect example with the supposed pusher. But there are areas like Box Hill where you have UFO sightings and you have Bigfoot sightings, but you also have missing people. There's a famous case there of a young girl who was last seen at Box Hill who just disappeared. And it was I think it was only in 1998, something like that. I'd have to look it up. But there's been a documentary on it, and this poor young lass was last seen at the Hill, never to be seen again. And there is a correlation between these areas and strange missing people. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's being abducted. I'm saying I don't know what's going on there, but I would like to see if we can, how many missing people as well. Clapham Woods is a good example.
Right.
And Epping Forest. There are lots of missing people, but there are also accounts of, like, Bigfoot, UFOs, strange lights, drumming, voices, all the things that we've talked about tonight, and missing people who just suddenly go missing for no reason. A little bit like the 411, but on a much smaller basis.
We've got it at Bempton, and that is a big thing on Bempton, is the missing people. And I devoted a lot of time researching these unfortunate men, mostly, that went to Bempton. And I did look at whether these people had got a potential for suicide, shall we say, or a history of depression, and ruled out. Obviously, you could have expanded the book and filled it with these people, but they've got to fit a certain sort of profile and be a certain type of person, and basically quite well adjusted, with nothing untoward or no suggestion that they were ever going to sort of take their own life or do anything that would erase them, for want of a better word. And these people, most of them had just parked up for a day's parking at the nature reserve or at Flamborough,
and just gone.
Never been seen again. One guy, I think 2010, I think his name was Matchin, and 7 days later, Nigel Savage, 16 miles away, vanished. And I don't know if we touched on this last time, but the Missing Persons Bureau that's displayed like a drafts board. Yeah. All the faces of these missing people, East and North Yorkshire. Now, I was only talking about this the other day, and I contacted them, and just to say, like I said, you've got this guy here, say Nigel Savage, and he's gone missing. But you've said he lived in Hull, and you've got Edward Machin, and he's gone missing, and you've said he lived in York. And they're saying, but do you not realise that they've all gone from Bempton? Right, yeah, they've all gone missing in the same place. Why? I mean, it's a fabulous organisation. I'm not knocking it. I get you. But why aren't we saying where they have actually last been seen?
See, that's what they need, yeah. A simple algorithm on a computer can do that. You'd run it and it would, a little bit like Codis for the forensic, you'd run it and anything that was anywhere that Bempton it would pop up, but it won't if it's not last seen at.
Yeah, well, and it's a fact. I mean, out of this list of 20-odd people, there's at least 9 gone from Bempton. I mean, Bempton's a tiny little
it is
spot on the map with nothing apart from a bird sanctuary that in the wintertime is devoid of anyone. And after 4 o'clock, you're not going to get anybody on them cliff tops.
No.
You know, it's a hostile, harsh environment that faces the North Sea. You know, so it is interesting, you know, that there's such a concentration of people going from that area. Me and Bob Brown, the Beacon of Light radio host, were up there on November the 5th, 2017.
Yeah.
So before anybody thinks, oh, you've seen fireworks, this is out at sea. And we were lucky. We saw the lights 13 times, and we managed to film them about 3 times. But what is interesting, and I'm not saying this is the reason, but I'm throwing it in because it's genuine, on November the 6th, Flamborough Head, in a sea cove, in a little cove, they found a man, obviously deceased. You know, and you think to yourself, well, we saw these lights over Flamborough Head on November the 5th. I can't come out and stick my hand up and say A is responsible for B because I've no idea.
Yeah, but could it be?
Body. But and what's strange is this body was found in a sea cave. The cliffs are about 200 foot down onto a rocky beach.
Yeah.
Now, if you'd gone down 200 foot, I think the chances of surviving would be slim.
Yeah, most definitely.
Slim to nil. The sea cave, he didn't get washed into the sea cave because he was high up in it, and even in the spring tides, the water doesn't go up to that cave. Right. So how's he got in it?
Yeah.
Now, they said they'd found him on the news, and some geography students found him from Scotland, I believe. So they said they'd found him, and then there was one piece in the newspaper saying his name and his age. And that was November the 6th that they found him, and it was in the Thursday's Bridlington Free Press, and there's been nothing said since.
That's strange, isn't it?
I've tried. I know a few police officers, and I've spoken to them, and nobody knows a thing. I've got my suspicions, and it's nothing to do with lights, my suspicions, by the way. I'm not trying to I'm using the lights as an example because it's true. We did film November the 5th. But I think there's going to be more to this, and I shall continue to dig because I'm sure it's going to be interesting. This is the same area where over 50 sheep have been mutilated. Right. This is the same area where the harbour porpoise, the little dolphins, were being found all through 2017 with massive trauma underneath the jaw, like 2 to 3 inch round holes straight through the jaws. I've got the photographs of these. I've got loads of the sheep. The dolphins are harder because obviously people walking on the beach and things are coming across them. I've got about 4 pictures, but there were a lot more found. Same area where the deer have been killed. I'm not saying that that's what's happened to this man, but you'll have to excuse my phone. I shall answer that in a moment because we're doing this. So yeah, it's interesting, and this is the same area where all the unexplained phenomena is occurring. It's just multitudes of unexplained phenomena. You know, the sort of the lights, the missing people, the animal mutilations, and I don't think Bempton's unique. It might be a little bit more concentrated, say, than some areas, but there's other areas in other parts of the country which are just as strong. Don't forget, Deborah, that I'm fortunate that I'm researching this sort of full time. So I'm going to find more. So it probably seems more rich in the phenomena. But if other people had the time to devote to their little pocket, to their selected area, they'd probably find just as much. You know, I think it's there. I think
there's people out there as well, and sometimes they worry. The word like researcher kind of puts them off. They think that you've got to have this kind of basically, when we say a researcher, we mean somebody who's really interested, don't we?
Yeah, of course we do. I'm nothing special.
Who's just like prepared to dig. It doesn't matter if it's an hour a week. It doesn't matter. You know, you're on your own. You might be that person just doing an hour that finds the really important clue.
Yeah, you might be the person that's got a Saturday morning to devote to your given subject, and you find, like you just said, you find the answer.
Yeah.
You know, just because I'm at it often, I'll be up there tomorrow morning early doors, and don't make me any better. It's just that I'm lucky that I've got the time to devote to it at the moment. I mean, and I'm 55 year old. I'm not always going to be able to charge around these woods and stuff. Do you know what I mean? I'll throw that one out. I always say it to my wife. You know, if I ever go missing, if I never planned it,
I never planned it.
I've never planned it. So you know, stranger things have been said, haven't they?
Well, yeah. We were talking before where ties in with what we're saying. We were talking about an area, weren't we, where you saw a surveillance van.
Yeah.
And me and you were talking about it on YouTube, and a good friend of mine got in touch with me by email and said, our friends have reported seeing that van on, not all the time, it's not there all the time, but it does show up on occasion. So the idea there is, well, can you log the dates that it shows up so that we've got one little log of what's happening? If anything strange happens in that area, we can then check back with that girl and say, you know, was that van around at the time? And she might say, no, not that day, but the day after it was, or the day before it was. There's hundreds of people out there researching other subjects like the paranormal, even the Wiccans, the pagans, the bushcrafters. That skill set is what we need, because they're out in the places and they're mixing with places with people who've got these stories. And like, I know it's a big ask, and me and Paul will say, do you know anything about? But it's not that hard to start the conversation. You could just say something as simple as, oh, I heard a funny story about round here the other day. And some people will say to her, well, you know, actually, when I was younger, and they might be interested in the paranormal and would never have thought of getting in touch with either me or Paul. But
That's correct.
you know, we could then swap information with them, and either one of us will go, well, that makes sense. That's something I can roll with now, or something I can research into now.
It really does, and you know, I mean, as the listeners will gather, we're probably fishing for a bit of information talking about this today. But it's the only way we're ever going to get it. It's difficult enough getting people to talk. And
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you're the same as me, Deborah. You know, half of the people that come to you probably say, "I'd rather not have my name used in this."
Yeah,
but
they do.
Don't mind. I mean, one of the strangest things is that I realised that I hope you can remember him. You've sort of made contact with a guy called Robbie in Scotland.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, and he's got a fantastic photograph. Yeah.
How crazy is that, Deborah, that me and Robbie were friends, 35 years ago. 35 years ago.
Pieces on a chessboard. That's what it feels like sometimes.
I couldn't believe it. I'd lost touch with the guy for all those years. And he just told me he's interested in this subject, and he lives in a croft up in Scotland.
Yeah.
And which he did. He moved down to Doncaster when I were living there like 30 years ago. And we became good friends. And all these years later, he appears again. And this guy...
He puts the hours in.
Come up with some fabulous information for you, because he's fairly dedicated.
That's what I'm saying. He puts the hours in, you know. He's out there in the woods all the time. He got a photograph, and he really bravely went to the papers with it. Now, not a lot of people do that. It's very rare, and they did, and they actually did a really positive talk on it. But what she didn't do is, she didn't include the photograph in the article.
That's a shame,
you know, when you report it, a little tip there, that is probably good if you're reporting on a photograph to add the image in with the article. She didn't do that. So I put it onto the website so that I could put his photo in, because it's really good. And people say, well, you know, it's a bit fuzzy, and you think, well, they don't just walk past you. If that happened, we'd all have a photograph, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
He's out there for hours and hours on end, and sometimes that's what you've got to do. As you know, Paul, you're in crap weather, you miss dinners, you miss family stuff, you miss all kinds of stuff, because you're trying to get an answer for yourself to, you know, A, what you've seen, or B, what you're interested in finding out. And he's done it, and it's paid, to me, it's paid off for him, because it's a good interest. He's out in the woods all the time. We're not harming anyone looking for Bigfoot, us lot, you know. We're just out there, like, we're looking for footprints and structures and photographs and stuff like that. And then you get involved in a community, And then you think, like you said then, and then it's like, well, actually, yeah, I know Paul, and I met Rob through Charmaine, who's a fellow witness. You're only ever 5 people away from someone else, is what they say, isn't they, really?
Yeah,
So,
but, I can vouch for the guy's sort of credibility outside of this subject. I never knew that. Well, at the time, I don't think I was interested in the UFO phenomena because of my own experiences from childhood, and I never thought, Deborah, that I'd get interested in the
strange figures that we see.
Yeah, the werewolf, Bigfoot type element. It just didn't interest me. And then I got writing Truth Proof, and these stories just kept cropping up from Flixton.
It's similar for me. They just kept. I couldn't ignore them anymore. There was that many coming in. I just couldn't ignore them anymore.
But I told you about the animal running at the side of the car.
Yeah.
Time we spoke, didn't I?
Yeah.
I've sort of written that up, and I threw a few more questions at the guy. I did not by phone. Because you were very, very reluctant to talk last time. I mean, we had a great conversation, but I knew that he's not going to sort of strike a conversation up all the time. But I emailed him with my questions, and I don't think I asked him. I didn't think I spoke about the size of this creature's head or what he assumed the size of its head was at the time. And I gave him the sort of scenario: was it as big as a mastiff's head?
Yeah.
Or in comparison to how big was it in comparison to a bear's head and a mastiff's? And he said as big as a grizzly bear's.
Right. Yeah.
Incredible. I mean, this guy. We've got some perfectly, hopefully, rational guy driving a Jaguar car in between 9 and 9:30 at night and claims he says a werewolf. There's a monster at the side of my car door. Yeah. He says they were literally inches from him. He said, it's only the glass between us, and I can't get my head round how he had these glowing yellow eyes and it was looking into the car, running forwards.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to dress the story up any different and say, well, looking other way, but just for the skeptic to make it more sensible to the skeptic. This is what the man told me, and I believe his story. I believe he's seen something, and I don't believe everybody. There's some right sort of dodgy stories and people out there who turn a satellite into some kind of fabulous mothership as it passes over. What do we call it? The space station. And I've just seen a fabulous UFO. No, it was check the times and everything. It was space station. But you're never going to change the mindset of those kinds of people. But this guy, I think he's seen something. We'll call it the real deal. He's seen something, and it showed up 6 miles out of Flixton.
Yeah, exactly.
11 miles out of Flixton, we've got. Then there's a place called Ganton close to Flixton, Deborah.
Yeah.
And Andy Ramsden, I don't know if you know Andy.
No.
He's a friend of mine. He's into his UFO research and things, and he's a lorry driver. And he took some hardcore to a farm, some limestone for a building they were doing. And he'll touch on the subject of UFOs or whatever with anyone he can, see whether he can glean a bit of information. And because he was close to Flixton, he asked this guy if he'd ever heard of the Flixton werewolf.
Yeah.
This guy says, well, I can do a little bit better than that. He says, well, what do you mean? He said, well, when I was a young man, a young boy, I've always worked on these farms, and the farm just up the road, he says, there's a farmer, an old farmer called Jimmy Keith.
Right.
So this is in Ganton. I don't know if anybody will ever listen to it from Ganton, but if you do, you might, and you might be able to throw your mind back to somebody called Jimmy Keith. But Jimmy Keith claimed to have seen, we'll not call it, we're in Ganton, so we're not the Flixton werewolf, but it's in the same area, this huge hair-covered man with a dog-type head down at Ganton. So the Ganton runs along the cars. It's all that low-lying land which would go then to Caton and Flixton, where the other farmer at the opposite end at Fulton claims to have seen it running across the fields and then stopping and squatting down and then continuing to run. And where did it run to? Spellhow Plantation, the burial mound of Spellhow.
Right. I'm just looking at my map now and thinking, oh my Lord, I know where it's heading.
It's just crazy, and you've got the diamond plantation up there. And you've got all these places, these things are seen. The old chaps in the 1940s, I don't have it off the top of my head, this one, there were 2 young boys, and there's only one alive now, and they saw that thing at the side of the burial mound at Sharp Howe, the Barrow Cemetery.
Yeah, the Barrow
There's
Cemetery.
7 burial mounds. Just sat with its back to a tree, looking at something in its hands. I know I've told this story hundreds of times, but I just find it incredible. And when I spoke to this man and said to him, I said, how many people sort of knew about this. He says, well, if you've not lived here like 5 generations or whatever, he says you're not even local. 50 years, you're not even local.
Yeah, exactly.
He says there's an handful of people who can tell you about what you're calling the Flixton werewolf. He says, but these other people, these outsiders, they might have seen things and that, but they don't talk about it. They've not got the sort of intimate, old, handed down knowledge that these people have. And there's still a couple of people in village. I was told there were 5 people in village who'd got quite a lot of knowledge of it, and there's still a couple I've never managed to speak to. One in particular has probably got more than anybody. And I might get to them eventually. It just depends. Usually you need a friend of a friend to introduce you.
You need a shoe-in, don't you? That's what I always say. You just need a shoe-in. Yeah.
You do, yeah. I mean, there's a farm up at Hunanby, and it'll be after harvest very soon. I'm going to go up to speak to these people at the farm. It's took a few years, and it's unusual how you win people's confidence. And I don't mean by trickery. It just turned out that me and my wife looked after an old chap years ago, and he had some cats, and they had to go into like not a cattery, people who take cat refuge. Yeah,
refuge.
But this lady at this farm took the cats. We only found out sort of recently, but now we've become friends. Do you see?
Yeah,
because of the old guy and the cats.
Yeah.
And I'm invited up to the farm. I always knew that they've got these couple of incredible stories to tell me, and I'm really looking forward to going up and spending a bit of time with them and getting the stories. There's multiple witness sightings. There's the husband, the wife, the mum, the dad, and the son. And I've got some interesting stories from a farm at Hunanby. So to come on, I sort of live for this. I mean, I'm actually a bit sad to some people, but I just love it.
I love it. I'm just thinking, I have nothing in that area apart from the Danesdyke account and the Flixton account. How many other areas in the UK am I sat thinking have nothing going on? And then I talk to somebody like you and they say, well, there's at least 5 witnesses in that village. And you're thinking, how many lost accounts are out there?
Well, that's what that lady said about the owl. When we talked about the owl circling that revived her memory. She said, I said, do you want me to use your name? She said, yes, you can do. She says, and I think it needs documenting.
Yeah, that's it. It is. There's a lot of them will say to me, tides are changing. It used to be 70-30 where they'd go, don't use my name. And now they'll say, no, I don't mind. And now people are saying, no, I want to come on the show and talk about it. I want to get it off my chest. There's a massive change in the tide, which unfortunately, as this is my second interview with Paul, and I'm getting to the end of my time now, I will have to bring him back on again. But if you want to find Paul's books, you can find them on Amazon. I think it's Truth Proof, isn't it, Paul?
It's Truth Proof, and I'd just say to anybody, just type that into your search engine, and I think they'll be the first thing that comes up. And like I always say, have a look at reviews. And if you think they're worth buying, have a read, and I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, and if you want to get hold of me, I don't mind my email being out there. It's Debbie Hatswell, all small letters, @gmail.com, and I can put you in touch with Paul.
I think it's my email. I don't mind that, Deborah.
Yeah, throw it out there, and then they can get in touch with you.
All lowercase, Paul Sinclair, ILF @gmail.com.
Right, that's fabulous. So until next week, thank you all for joining me. This has been the Crypto Realm on the Paranormal UK, and I'll be back next week with another amazing guest. So good night, everyone.